Do you think an airline makes money when you buy a ticket? What if I told you that most of the time they lose money flying, but become billionaires selling points that you can't always use? This is aviation's best-kept paradox worldwide, a truth that has remained hidden for decades in corporate boardrooms. Imagine the scene that repeats thousands of times daily around the globe. A Boeing 737 packed with 189 passengers taking off from John F. Kennedy International Airport bound for Los Angeles. To the ordinary passenger watching that packed aircraft cut through the clouds, the conclusion seems obvious. This must represent guaranteed profit for the airline. After all, every seat was sold, every passenger paid their fare, and the plane is operating perfectly. But reality is much more complex and surprising than our intuition suggests. Behind that apparently profitable operation exists a financial machinery that consumes resources voraciously and relentlessly.
If you're also passionate about the world of aviation, consider subscribing to the channel and supporting our team.
Flying is literally one of the most expensive businesses on the planet. Aviation fuel, technically known as Jet A1, can represent between 25% to 35% of an airline's total operational costs, fluctuating daily according to international oil price oscillations. To dimension this dependence, imagine that a single New York-London trip on an Airbus A330 consumes approximately 22,500 gallons of fuel, costing about $45,000 in jet fuel alone. Add to this astronomical account the highly specialized salaries of pilots, flight attendants, ground crew, aircraft mechanics, air traffic controllers, flight dispatchers, and dozens of other critical functions, which together can represent around 20 to 25% of an aircraft's operating costs. Each commercial flight directly or indirectly employs hundreds of highly qualified professionals. Preventative and corrective aircraft maintenance represents another universe of costs. A Rolls-Royce Trent 700 engine, used on Airbus A330 aircraft, costs approximately $25 million and must undergo mandatory inspections every 6,000 flight hours. A complete overhaul can cost $3 million and keep the aircraft grounded for weeks. Multiply this by fleets of 100, 200, or 300 planes, and you have an operation that continuously consumes millions of dollars every day. Airport fees, often invisible to the final passenger, represent another significant drain. Each landing and takeoff at John F. Kennedy International Airport can cost between $2,000 to $4,000, depending on aircraft weight and operation time. International airports like Heathrow in London or Charles de Gaulle in Paris charge even higher fees. Mandatory insurance, aircraft financing or leasing are even more costly. A new Boeing 737 MAX costs $120 million, and recurring mandatory training for crews, navigation, communication, and meteorology systems, government licenses, regulatory compliance, and you have an operation that literally burns money every minute of operation. When all these costs are mathematically distributed per transported passenger, the result is shockingly small. Average profit per passenger at major world airlines hovers around a mere $13. To put this in real perspective, it's less than you pay for a basic meal at the airport, less than a beer at a terminal bar, less than a magazine at the newsstand. This balance is so fragile that any unforeseen event can instantly transform profit into loss. A storm that cancels 50 flights can generate millions in reallocation, accommodation, and compensation costs. A mechanical problem forcing an emergency landing can cost $500,000 in a single occurrence. A route with occupancy below 80% already compromises the operation's financial viability. The business model based exclusively on passenger transport has proven unsustainable on many occasions. So how do companies like American Airlines, Delta, and United not only survive this cruel mathematics, but thrive on stock exchanges, pay dividends, and constantly expand operations. How do we explain that some of these companies are worth billions of dollars in the financial market? The answer is floating invisibly on your smartphone right now. Stored in applications you probably don't even imagine represent financial assets more valuable than entire aircraft fleets. It's stored in digital databases that move more money than traditional flight operations. Welcome to the parallel and secret universe of mileage programs, where airlines discovered how to transform abstract digital points into tangible liquid gold. This discovery completely revolutionized the nature of the airline business. We're no longer talking about an industry focused on efficiently transporting people from one place to another. We're facing sophisticated financial operations that rival traditional banks, insurance companies, and even securities brokers. The transformation happened gradually, almost imperceptibly over the last 2 decades. Mileage programs were born in the 80s as an apparently simple and benevolent customer loyalty strategy. The original concept was transparent. Fly with us, accumulate points proportional to distance traveled, exchange for occasional free flights. It seemed a genuine consumer benefit, a way for the company to thank customer preference and loyalty. But what began as a relationship program evolved into something much more sophisticated and profitable. Today, these programs have become true money-making machines, operating as parallel banks that issue and control their own digital currency. They have completely transcended their original loyalty function to become the gravitational center of the entire business operation. The machinery works elegantly, almost artistically in its profitable simplicity. While you believe you're earning miles by using your credit card at the supermarket, gas station, or paying monthly bills, you're actually participating in a complex financial system where banks and credit institutions buy millions of miles in advance from airlines at negotiated fixed values. A practical example clarifies the entire operation. Citibank can negotiate with American Airlines to purchase 100 million miles for $35 million paid in advance. These miles are then offered as rewards to the institution's premium credit card holders. Each dollar spent on the card can generate 1 or 2 miles, depending on the purchase category. But here lies the ingenious trick that completely changed world aviation. When the bank makes this massive mile purchase, the airline receives real money, liquid, immediately available in checking account without having to fly absolutely anyone anywhere. It's pure revenue, without any of the brutal operational costs that drain profits from traditional flights. There's no fuel burned, no extra salaries paid, no aircraft wear, no airport fees, no maintenance, no additional insurance. It's simply money entering the company's cash flow in exchange for a future digital transport promise. And here we arrive at the point where financial mathematics reveals its most impressive and well-guarded secrets. The numbers behind this operation are so monumental, they challenge our traditional understanding of what it really means to be an airline in the 21st century. American Airlines, pioneer and master of this revolutionary model, presented results that left financial analysts perplexed. The A-Advantage program generated more profit than flight operations in several recent quarters. In 2023, the company earned over $5.2 billion exclusively from its loyalty program and strategic credit card partnerships. To adequately dimension this astronomical value, imagine that this figure represents more annual revenue than many entire airlines, including their complete fleets, international routes, and thousands of employees managed to generate transporting passengers around the world during an entire year. Delta Airlines was even more spectacular in its results, reaching the historic mark of $6.6 billion with its SkyMiles program in 2023. This amount literally exceeds the gross domestic product of countries like the Maldives or Bhutan. It's more money than many traditional multinationals earn annually selling tangible physical products. These numbers aren't statistical coincidences or temporary market anomalies. They represent a fundamental, almost philosophical transformation in the essential nature of contemporary aviation business. In recent market analyses, it was discovered that the financial value of some companies' mileage programs exceeds, in market valuations, the combined value of the entire aircraft fleet, international routes, airport slots, and the company's physical infrastructure. It's like discovering that Microsoft makes more money selling decorative window stickers than with the operating system itself, or that Coca-Cola profits more from bottle caps than from the soft drink itself. The analogy may seem absurd, but it precisely reflects the revolution that happened in aviation. In the United States, loyalty program companies earned $14.2 billion in the third quarter of 2024 alone, demonstrating that this trend has reached unprecedented proportions.
The American miles market moves figures that rival entire traditional industrial sectors. But how does all this financial transformation impact you, the consumer who carries miles in your digital pocket, believing you're participating in a benevolent reward system? The answer, unfortunately, doesn't offer much comfort or optimism. You have become, without realizing it, a fundamental piece on a financial chessboard where rules are constantly rewritten, always favoring exclusively the house. Your participation in this game is essential to keep the entire machinery functioning, but the odds of you actually coming out ahead are carefully calibrated to be minimal. Airlines exercise absolute control over three crucial variables that mathematically determine whether your accumulated miles actually possess any tangible, practical value. First, they decide unilaterally, at any time, how much each individual mile is worth. A mile that today buys a domestic New York-Miami segment can next week be insufficient for the same exact flight, same class, same time, simply because the company decided to adjust its internal conversion table. This adjustment doesn't follow transparent market criteria or official inflation. It's an internal corporate decision, frequently based on cash flow needs, seasonal commercial strategies, or simply revenue maximization. The consumer isn't consulted, isn't given significant advance warning, and has no recourse or protection against these unilateral changes. Second, and perhaps even more frustrating, companies rigidly control when you can effectively redeem your accumulated miles. That dream European trip you meticulously planned for December, collecting miles for 2 years? There might simply be no mileage availability exactly on the days and times you need. The phantom availability phenomenon is systematic and intentional. Mysteriously, there are always seats available for those willing to pay cash, but the specific seats designated for mile redemption have sold out or aren't available at this time. It's artificial scarcity, algorithmically created to direct consumers toward cash purchases. The third variable controlled by companies is perhaps the most perverse: the planned and systematic depreciation of mile value. Your miles constantly lose purchasing power, not through official communications or public announcements, but in daily practice. What cost 20,000 miles for international travel in 2020 can easily cost 40,000 or 50,000 miles today for the same destination, same class. It's artificially controlled inflation that always works against the final consumer. Unlike traditional monetary inflation, which affects the entire economy proportionally, mile inflation is specifically directed to reduce the value of points accumulated by consumers. This triple system creates a fascinating and troubling psychological effect. You always feel you're almost there, close to getting that dreamed free ticket, but rarely manage to make the really advantageous redemption you had originally imagined. Recent data shows that 77.4% of Americans use points and miles to exchange for airline tickets, but most report frustration with limited availability and constant devaluation of accumulated points. The practical result of this dynamic is that millions of Americans religiously accumulate miles for years, watching them gradually but systematically lose value while continuing to pay high annual fees on premium credit cards justified exclusively by the supposed advantage of earning miles as rewards. It's a financial cycle that primarily and almost exclusively benefits partner financial institutions and the airlines themselves. The final consumer rarely comes out effectively benefited in the proportion they imagine or expect. For the ordinary passenger, this model represents a doubly harmful equation. Increasingly higher fares on cash-paid flights, since companies can afford to maintain high prices, knowing a significant portion of their revenue is already guaranteed by advanced sales of miles, and increasingly restrictive and less generous mileage programs. The question that naturally emerges is both philosophical and practical. Are contemporary airlines really air transport companies, or have they transformed into sophisticated financial institutions that keep planes flying only as a necessary showcase to validate their points programs? Passenger transport would become merely a necessary operational showcase to maintain legitimacy and credibility of the mileage program with consumers and regulators. Are we inevitably walking toward this dystopian scenario? And we, passengers and consumers, are we really being rewarded and benefited, or just involuntarily financing the most ingenious and sophisticated revenue generation system the aviation industry has ever invented? The fundamental paradox remains unchanged and increasingly evident. Flight operations generate systematic losses. Mileage programs generate extraordinary profits. And you, who all this time believed you were gaining something valuable, might actually be financially sustaining the most revolutionary and sophisticated transformation that commercial aviation has ever experienced.